G'day, Ancient Mahari here. Borderline personality disorder and responsibility and codependent rescuing. The clients I've worked with for over 30 years, and I'm still working with clients, and I learn so much from clients and what their experience is. And there is this reality of an abyss of understanding, an abyss of perception between people with BPD and people with codependency. People who are, the ex of somebody with BPD, do they understand everything about what's going on inside a person with BPD? So first of all, how much do you understand that person with BPD that you might still be with? How much do you understand that person with BPD that is an ex? Or in that on and off, you're not sure what is going on place? Because the thing is, it's like two emotional parallel worlds, borderline personality and what's going on for people with codependency. And yet there is some overlap in between. But what's really important is people with borderline personality can heal, can recover, and do. But what about the person with BPD that's in your life, a family member, a significant other, a sibling, a parent? If they're not taking personal responsibility, if they don't go to get treatment, then how can you keep rescuing them? And what is that about? And what does it all mean? Some people take the attitude that people with BPD can never recover, but yet you have to think about that one person who's in your life, because that's all that really matters, or should really matter to you. Who is the person with BPD that is or was in your life? And if they're not taking personal responsibility, then do they get a pass for that? You get really hurt. But is that your fault? Because you didn't sign up to be in a relationship with somebody who has BPD. Most people don't, when you don't know what it is. People don't have any reference point at all until and unless you're in a relationship or you're dating somebody with BPD for quite a while. And then stuff starts really going wrong and you're really confused and you're really hurt. And then people get online and start looking at my girlfriend or my boyfriend does this or that. Or my husband or my wife is like, and what is this all about? And then people start to realize what's going on. And some people might say, well, once you realize what's going on, then how come still some people with codependency keep rescuing or enabling or trying to fix the person with BPD? But, we're talking about human lives here, right? Nobody's going to be perfect. People take their own amount of time to learn and understand what's going on or what's gone on. And I think one thing I'd just like to say at this juncture, I'm not a BPD apologist. What needs to be said here too is that not every single person with BPD is the same. Not every single person with BPD is going to stay the same untreated. And not every person with BPD is going to remain unhealed. But again, what you need to focus on more than the global everybody with BPD out there is the person that's in your life or was in your life. And the other thing that's really true about people with borderline personality is that they have high intellectual ability often. They have a lost self, so they don't have a lot of emotional intelligence. They don't have emotional maturity. And some people with codependency, everybody's different. Some people with codependency might be more emotionally mature than other people with codependency. And so, but what is really key to understand and know, which maybe many people already do know, is that people with BPD and their specific challenges and what's going on for them and what they haven't learned and the who that they aren't because they've lost themselves, etc. That's why they need treatment. It's not like that's who they are 24/7 all the time. But they can be like, once they get into interpersonal relationships, everything gets worse for people, especially untreated with BPD. So I want to say a little bit about there's hope for people with BPD. If they go and they get treatment and they stick with it, and it's not about psychiatry's cure, it's about they really can recover and heal. But that's not what people with codependency, with somebody with BPD in your life right now who's not in treatment, not getting better, not really self-aware of what they're doing. But do they get a pass for that? I don't think so. I think that like for example, if a person with BPD commits a crime, they're not going to get to be able to plead not guilty by reason of insanity or anything because they are responsible for their actions. I think what a lot of people don't realize, and again, I'm just making a few statements about BPD generally, right? Because it's different in everybody's case. You're not all with the same borderline. There are some people, 10 to 15%, that have BPD so severely. And I work with clients who've gone through this. And so severely, well, what does that mean? Well, it just means that because I'm not trying to measure pain, it just means that they are more dangerous and they do things in a way that most with BPD don't. People with BPD, I just got to say it one more time, they can't love you. They don't have any self from within to love you. So definitely this is a painful situation for people with codependency. For your mental health, if you have codependency, and after these relationships, you need to know they are responsible for what they did, whether they get it or not. But there's no sense in taking, like, I don't take comments off this channel from people with BPD and isolate them and say, well, this person with BPD said ABC, so therefore, you see, all people with BPD are like this. And I think that it just behooves people in these relationship situations and filled with so much pain, no matter the relationship type, for people to understand where your limits and boundaries are or need to be, and where a person with BPD maybe can't take personal responsibility, but it doesn't absolve them of personal responsibility. So people with codependency are rescuing people. People with codependency are trying to rescue people with BPD because the whole thing is the idealization, is the first idealization with the mirroring and the borderline codependent presentation of people pleasing and wanting to merge with you for identity. And that's not really about love for them, but they don't know this consciously. But I want to say it again, and maybe people just think it's just semantics. But people with BPD do not love bomb. That's what narcissists do. People with BPD aren't narcissists. But more to the point, these are some of the most painful relationships on earth to try to recover from. Very complicated, very complex. And I think that's what people with codependency need to know more about, because those struggles are very real. And you invest love. And one thing about codependent love, see, not all codependents are the same either. So some people's love with codependency is not maybe as unhealthy as other people's. But what really happens in these relationship dynamics is that you get the person with BPD who doesn't know who they are if they're untreated, and they do have the idealization and devaluing going on. And of course, the honeymoon phase is going to be like beyond amazing. And then for people with codependency, everything else after that. And the first evaluation split is not necessarily where a relationship ends. It can be in some cases, but far from it in most cases. There'll be lots of split-to evaluation, and that's happening inside the person with BPD, but it hurts people with codependency, and they'll often blame you that it's your fault, but it isn't, because it doesn't have anything to do with the person that people with BPD are trying to relate to. It's all inside of the person with BPD. But they have had to externalize that when they were young to survive. So the very things that help people with BPD to survive those young and often very difficult and brutal childhoods becomes extremely maladaptive dysfunctional coping mechanisms in adulthood. I really think it's important for people with codependency to know that what they do is not your fault. And you didn't do this to yourself. So it's not your fault in the sense that when you got into this relationship, you had no way to know. I mean, people on their second, third, 10th try, well, okay, that's different. But then see, not all people with codependency are the same. So I don't know, but it just seems to me that a lot of people out there in general, and just, what you read on message boards and everything, I think everybody would be better served by speaking about their own, lots of people do, but then they globalize everything, like every person with BPD is the same, which isn't really true because there's vast difference among people with BP. And if we were to say that all people with BP are the same, meaning that they're all at the same level of inability to relate, that none of them have had any treatment, that they can't change, that borderlines are always going to split even after treatment and or recovery, that's just not true. But again, for so many people with codependency, what's happening in your relationship, what's happening in your relationship, or if it's over. You need to focus on what you've been through, what you are going through, and how you're going to heal from that and recover from that, more so than every borderline on earth is this or that or the other thing. And there's lots of people online with BPD who comment on regularly on channels like mine and other people's, and people who have BPD with channels, and often what they report in wherever they are in the recovery or not, that's not a gold standard, right? Because it's each person's own experience. So there could be somebody who's been in therapy for 10 years with BPD and they still have significant troubles. And then there could be somebody else who's been in therapy for BPD for 10 years and they're pretty much healed and recovered. So, and it's important to know that if you're with somebody right now that's untreated or maybe even undiagnosed, but strongly showing all of those, the characteristics and the unfortunate nature of the way that people with BPD can't really relate to others very well, especially in relationships, then getting them into therapy, the focus on getting them into therapy isn't going to save your relationship, because therapy is a long-term process. People with BPD probably do better to not be in a relationship when they're in serious and long-term therapy. But I just want to say one other thing, and then I'm going to get into something about codependent rescuing, right? People with BPD can and do recover, but the heartbreak for so many people with codependency is that the people that you know, or the person you know in your life isn't going to be one of those people or isn't in treatment. So I think it's just important not to speak in globalized terms, because all people with codependency aren't alike any more than all people with BPD. So one other quick thing on BPD, they're responsible for what they do even if they don't get it, because they're responsible to go to get treatment. That's their responsibility. Whatever happened to them in childhood, it matters, but it pales in comparison to how they really need to go get help to be able to examine that. So anyway, people with BPD can and do recover, and people with BPD are not always going to split if they get into a recovery process. However, that might not be what most people with codependency are going to experience with the person with BPD in your life. What's happening for people with codependency? How can you give up the control and stop trying to rescue? Because it is an externalization out for the person with codependency of some, feeling out of control inside a self, often goes back to childhood. And so then this is why there's this externalization of control from people with codependency. It's not always a conscious process. But so how can people with codependency try to work on and give up that externalization out of control, where you might really believe you can help and rescue this person when you really can't? So how can people stop rescuing? Well, codependency is at the heart of it, not always in people's conscious minds, a lot about control. And it has a lot to do with trying to control the person with BPD, because there's something going on there that's double layered, right? It's like there's something that you didn't get met in childhood, more often than not, very different for each person with codependency. People have many different ways of manifesting this typical codependent dysfunctional relational pattern of its own in terms of the way that they relate and who you get into relationships with. Codependents need to control to feel secure. Well, that definitely comes back to childhood. And this is not something that is usually in the conscious mind of most people in these relationships and with codependency with somebody with BPD or a narcissist. And so one of the forms of control actually in codependency is rescuing in and of itself. Many people are, helpful and caring people, especially if you know that you have codependency. But then there's this impulsivity to rescue others from their self-imposed, or maybe, from their childhood what happened to them, but now their self-imposed predicaments because they are choosing to make no choice. People with BPD often choose to make no choice. They can make a choice for change. They could make a choice for treatment and therapy. BPD is extremely treatable. And nobody needs psychiatry's cure to recover, because that's not the way recovery really takes place for people with BPD. So anyway, people with codependency just have this impulsivity of need to rescue. This is the manifestation of need for control that people with codependency have based on something that happened to you in your childhood, which again, I just want to stress is vastly different for a lot of people with codependency. So people with codependency often, again, not all or everybody's the same, stay far too long in dysfunctional helping, trying to rescue, and in trying to overgive in relationships when somebody is treating you horribly, very poorly, not respectfully, and things are changing from moment to moment. Maybe you have a really good time or a really good day, and the next thing you know, because the approach avoidance conflict in BPD is really something that takes a lot of treatment for people not to be struggling with that, because there's disorganized attachment in BPD, so they're not really attaching. Because of lack of self, they really can't love you. They really can't get emotionally intimate at all. And then there's a lot of people with codependency that have their own issues with emotional intimacy, which they may or may not be aware of. So sometimes this horrible fit that isn't a fit, not a healthy fit, turns into each person on either side in the relationship, whether with the person with BPD, not being aware of their difficulties and challenges to relate, and the person with codependency, each not realizing that they are both seeking after something in each other that neither really knows how to do, which is really get to emotional intimacy and maintain that, and do so in each person's being an independent person. So I'm not saying people with codependency are like people with BPD, but it's that overlap again. So the dysfunctional helping, it doesn't help the person with BPD, and it really ends up with people with codependency even being hurt more and more. And so the relationships at one point or another after the honeymoon phase and the idealization, all that really good, too good to be true stuff, when you start to fall in love, or you have fallen in love with them, and then you find out, oh wait, that's not who they really are. What's going on? It's so confusing. Well, the in the relationships, the resources become strained very quickly. Maybe more so for the person with BPD because they have less resources, and then more for the person with codependency who's like, what is going on here? With all the cognitive dissonance and the confusion and the utter agony of it all. And so the other thing that can happen with codependency is enabling of another person's addiction, or their incompetence, irresponsibility, their inability to be an adult, to take care of themselves, to function in the relationship, to pull their own weight, to take care of themselves, to see you, to be there, to mutually give back to you, be reciprocal. These are very one-way relationships for people with codependency and untreated borderline. So codependent rescuing means that the codependent retains this power and control over the codependent object, but they assume that people around them need to help. And hey, a lot of people with BPD do need a lot of the help. And so you step in even if it's clear that you can't make a difference. That's really the big thing. Because people with codependency want to make a difference, want the relationship to work out. And then what happens is you're trying to mold and change the person with BPD, and it can't be done. They could do it in treatment, but you can't do it for them. And then, well, that abandonment of self. And now you're starting to lose yourself more. And then there's everything they heap on top of that. And codependents meet people with BPD in that dysfunctionality. You're trying to change it. A lot of trying to validate them while they're invalidating you. A lot of anger, whether expressed or not, but by people with BPD and people with codependency. A lot of blaming, passive aggression. And these things happen in cycles. So after every cycle, it's like, then there might be a really good time. And that's that intermittent reinforcement that doesn't really help anybody out long term. And by rescuing, people with codependency put themselves, maybe unknowingly, in a kind of like, quote, superior role to the person with BPD, because it's a parental role. And it's not even, most people with codependency, that's not what they want. They want to be in a significant other relationship. And so I guess some people with codependency, if they were aware of it, might say to the person with BPD, but you need me. And, like things go really wrong in your life and I'm trying to help and and I'm here to do this for you because I love you and I care about you. So it's really important to know that these relationships are really dysfunctional and unhealthy for all kinds of reasons. But from the codependent perspective, because it always becomes a one up or a one down type of relationship, whether the person with BPD is trying to pull the one up and then the codependent feels one down, or vice versa. And I'm not saying that it's a conscious thing at all most of the time. It is important for people with codependency to be conscious, realize that if somebody hasn't asked for your help and or they're not making a choice to go get their own help, then why do you feel compelled to help them? It's really important to learn how to not take care of somebody with things that if they don't know how to do them, that they are responsible to learn how to do them. Really important to learn to set boundaries, really important to learn how to say no, and sometimes no in these relationships for people with codependency is no, I can't stay in this relationship. And that's really difficult and painful for people. And it's important not to assume that you need to do 100% of anything to try to work to solve any issue. That people with BPD, like, you can't solve their issues for them, and they can't solve their issues without treatment. And so if you're going to offer something, really, and this is what can break up a lot of these relationships, if you think about it this way, whatever you're giving and however you're loving and maybe over loving and over caring about this person with BPD, then really the question needs to be asked, well, if I'm giving all this and I'm doing all this and I'm taking all this responsibility, over giving, over sharing, and nothing is coming back, what is that person with BPD prepared to do? But then don't fool yourself into thinking in a relationship, oh, well, they go to therapy and that'll be great. Or couples counseling will solve the problems. Because sadly enough, that just really doesn't work that way. The more that you try to rescue them, the more that everything starts to deteriorate. And so the power and control games end up at some point in these relationships going both ways. Coming from the person with BPD, coming from people with codependency, and in various different iterations and manifestations of power and control games. And it's not the same motivation on each side all the time. But letting go of this, starting to be aware of it, to stop being involved in a power and control game, even if it's more generated by the person with BPD and you're responding to it, is a key to working your way toward recovery and maybe realizing that the relationship can't work out. And many people with codependency find it so difficult, understandably, to release themselves from an ingrained behavior since childhood in one way or another. And then it's a way of thinking, and people often don't know where it goes back to. So codependent rescuing is causing people with codependency a lot of pain, and it's very rarely, if ever, going to really help. somebody with BPD. And people with codependency remain lost after these relationships and in so much pain and difficulty because there's this avoidance in codependency of externalizing out what you most need to deal with and look at inside yourself to create that healthy, functional relationship to and with yourself. That's what codependents need to turn into, get help with in a healing recovery journey, and let the person with BPD go, because you are losing yourself and you are not helping them. You can't change them, fix them, or rescue them. The relationships are impossible. So if you have codependency and you've been with somebody with BPD, or you're not sure if it's on or off, you haven't gotten no contact yet, it's time to take care of you. You matter, and you need to find your own way forward and know more about yourself. And if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do click that picture there and subscribe to the channel, support the channel, and be notified of upcoming podcast videos and live streams. Take care.